She walked in wearing a simple white linen dress, flat sandals, no makeup, and a canvas tote bag. No one looked twice. At Maison Lumiere, appearances were everything, and she didn't look like money. Behind the glass counter, a sales associate leaned toward her colleague and whispered, "Watch her. That type doesn't buy. She steals." Nearby, a woman in a fur-trimmed coat smirked. She must think this is a thrift store. The laughter was quiet but sharp, slicing through the air like crystal. All Emily wanted was to see a necklace, a gift, something personal. But what she received instead were stares, cold shoulders, and a silent verdict unworthy. No one asked her name. No one knew she was about to change everything. Not with a fight, not with revenge, but with something much more powerful grace. And in 30 minutes a black Rolls-Royce would arrive and the room would fall completely silent. Emily Sanders stood still beneath the boutique's grand chandelier, its light catching in her eyes like softened stars. At 32, she carried herself with a quiet elegance. Blonde hair swept into a neat bun, skin bare, and luminous posture poised but unassuming. There was no need for attention. Her presence didn't shout. It whispered. In her tote was a worn leather notebook, a black ink pen, and a faded photograph her and Ryan laughing under a paper lantern on their wedding night. Once the director of a community shelter, Emily had stepped back from public life to focus on projects that mattered privately. Her wealth wasn't something she wore. It lived in the values she carried, the choices she made, and the love she nurtured. Today, she came for one thing: to see the pink diamond necklace. Not for status, not for spectacle, just to feel the story it might tell. To touch something rare and beautiful and gift it to someone who never asked for it. The moment Emily stepped through the glass doors of Maison Lumiere, a hush settled around her. Not of welcome, but of subtle rejection. The boutique glistened like a jewel box, velvet-lined cases glowing under golden light, marble floors gleaming with perfection. Classical music drifted softly, elegant, and distant. Women in silk blouses and men in tailored suits moved like they belonged, their designer logos quietly shouting worth. No one looked up as Emily entered except to scan her outfit, her sandals, her unbranded tote. A clerk behind the counter narrowed her eyes, then turned away, but Emily didn't falter. She walked slowly, her steps, light fingers brushing the edge of a glass case filled with sapphire rings. She paused in front of the centerpiece display, the pink diamond. Its glow was soft, warm, almost alive. For a moment she simply stood there, breathing it in. She didn't see judgment. She saw beauty, and she knew exactly who it was meant for. The pink diamond rested on a bed of deep velvet framed by twin white diamonds like stars orbiting a sunset. Its 18-karat blush center caught the light and refracted it into whispers of fire, elegant, quiet, impossibly rare. A small card beneath it read $12 million, private viewing only. Emily tilted her head, studying it not with greed, but with wonder. Behind the counter, Vanessa Hart watched her from a distance, immaculate in black lips, lacquered hair pulled into a tight twist. Her eyes skimmed Emily's dress, the flat sandals, the soft lines of a woman who didn't try to impress, and she made a decision without asking a single question. In this boutique, wealth had a uniform, leather heels, diamond studs, perfume priced by the drop. Emily, by contrast, brought nothing but a story in her eyes and a purpose in her heart, and that made her invisible in a room full of glass and judgment. Emily stepped closer to the display, her voice gentle but clear. "I'd like to see the pink diamond, please." Vanessa turned slowly as if disturbed. Her smile was tight, almost polite. "That piece is reserved for clients with appointments," she replied, her tone coated with practiced dismissal. Emily didn't flinch. "I understand," she said calmly, "but I'd still love to take a closer look." Vanessa's gaze dropped pointedly to the canvas tote, then to the sandals. "It's a high-value item," she said louder this time. A couple nearby glanced over. "We typically show it by invitation only." Emily offered a quiet smile. "I can afford it." That simple sentence, delivered without arrogance, hung in the air like a challenge. Vanessa blinked, then let out a laugh too sharp for the quiet room. "Do you even know how much it costs?" she asked, her voice rising. "Or are you just here for the air conditioning?" The judgment wasn't hidden. It was a blade. A ripple of amusement stirred the air. Near the bracelet display, a woman in a mink-trimmed coat, Chelsea Voss, chuckled into her champagne flute. "She must think this is a flea market," she muttered just loud enough. Her friend, a man in a navy suit with gold cufflinks, smirked. "No appointment, no chance," he whispered. The boutique shifted. Eyes turned. Phones tilted subtly upward. Emily felt their glances like static on her skin, thinly veiled mockery cloaked in designer silk. Still, she stood her ground, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the glass case. She didn't shrink, didn't respond. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was restraint. Behind her, Vanessa crossed her arms and said louder now, "This is a luxury environment. We don't do casual browsing with pieces like that." The diamond sparkled quietly between them, indifferent to the tension. Emily's gaze didn't leave it. "I'm not browsing," she said softly. "I came for something that matters." And she meant more than just jewelry. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice coated with condescension. "Let me be clear," she said, eyes narrowing. "We don't show pieces like this to walk-ins." Her tone turned icy on the last word, slicing through the air like chilled glass. Emily blinked once slowly. Her hand slipped into her tote, brushing against the leather spine of her notebook, a grounding touch. She could have said his name, could have mentioned Ryan, but that wasn't who she was. She exhaled quietly. Sometimes she said what people wear says less than what they value. Vanessa's brow arched. "And what exactly do you value?" she asked, mocking. Emily's reply came without pause. "Moments," she said. "Memories. Meaning." The clerk smirked. "Well, meaning doesn't pay for diamonds." Nearby, Chelsea snapped a photo of Emily, stifling a laugh. "Tag it. Thrift shop queen," she whispered. The room was shifting, no longer just rude, but cruel. Yet Emily stayed still, her posture soft but unshakable, her presence quietly unbending. The laughter grew quiet and poisonous. A second woman joined Chelsea, holding her phone half hidden behind a clutch. "Get the shoes," she whispered. "Those belong in aisle 9 at Target." Emily's sandals made no sound on the polished floor as she turned slightly toward the necklace again, choosing not to engage. Her gaze remained steady, serene. But Vanessa wasn't done. "Look," she said, projecting her voice. "I'm trying to save you from embarrassment. That necklace is $12 million. If you want to see something affordable, the gift section is by the door." Her words landed like coins dropped on marble-sharp metallic, meant to echo. A young man in a suit nearby murmured, "Is she seriously not leaving?" His companion replied, "She's probably casing the place." Emily's fingers curled around her tote strap. Her wedding photo shifted inside. She felt it move. Not anger, not fear. Just something deeper. Grief for how quickly people forget to see. She looked at the necklace again. Not with longing, with clarity. Beauty doesn't belong to the loudest voice, she thought. It belongs to those who recognize it. Chelsea stepped closer, her heels tapping with theatrical flair. She held up her phone, angling it deliberately toward Emily. "Say cheese," she sneered. "You'll be trending in our VIP group by lunch." The others chuckled, emboldened. One of them whispered, "Bet she's here for TikTok content. Poverty chic or something." Emily's breath stayed, even her eyes calm, but inside, something tightened like a thread pulled too far. Still, she didn't move. She didn't give them what they wanted. Vanessa smirked and leaned back against the counter. "Security keeps an eye on people like you," she said. "Last time someone walked in without an appointment, we found a ring missing an hour later. That wasn't a warning, it was an accusation, and everyone heard it." From across the room, the boutique's guard shifted his weight, eyeing Emily. A hush crept in, heavier than marble, colder than the diamonds behind glass. The necklace still shimmered beneath its spotlight, untouched, unseen. Emily's reflection appeared faintly in the glass, calm, composed, yet holding back the weight of every insult like a dam against rising tide. The air had turned dense, perfumed, and poisonous. Emily took a single step back, giving herself space, not retreat. Behind her, Chelsea's voice rang out syrupy and cruel. "Someone check her bag before she walks out with half the store." Laughter followed, clipped and practiced, the kind that feeds on humiliation. The security guard, Victor, straightened. He began moving toward her, one hand resting on his belt, his expression unreadable. A young woman near the window raised her phone and started filming. Emily felt the shift the moment the room stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a headline. Her grip on the tote tightened, but her face remained still, her gaze drifting toward the chandelier above as if looking for softness in the silence. No one asked her anything. No one listened. They judged, they mocked, they recorded. She wasn't a woman anymore. She was content, and yet in the center of it all she stood like stone in a storm, unmoved, untouched, and painfully aware. Victor stopped just short of her, his voice firm and public. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to look inside that bag." The words echoed through the boutique, bouncing off glass cases and velvet walls. Conversations paused. Eyes locked in. Phones tilted higher. Emily turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Of course," she said, her voice as steady as morning light. She opened the canvas tote without hesitation. Inside a notebook, a black pen, and a single creased photograph, two young lovers laughing under fairy lights. Victor stared, then gave a half shrug as if disappointed not to find scandal. "Keep it visible," he muttered, his tone heavy with implication. The humiliation wasn't in his words, but in how casually they were delivered, like she was already guilty. Behind her, someone whispered, "Called it." Another voice, "She looks the type." Emily gently closed the tote, her fingers trembling just enough to betray the storm she refused to show. And then, as if to confirm her place in their eyes, Chelsea tossed a crumpled tissue at her feet. "For your tears," she smirked. The room broke into soft, poisonous laughter. Emily stared at the crumpled tissue lying near her sandals. For a moment the room fell into a charged silence, expecting her to react, to break, to prove them right. But she didn't bend down, didn't speak. She simply looked at it, then slowly raised her gaze, letting it sweep across the room. Not with anger, with something quieter, sadder, disappointment perhaps, as if watching strangers forget their own humanity. Vanessa crossed her arms and smirked. "Still here," she said, voice sharp. "The mall's 3 blocks down. You'll feel more at home there." The comment landed hard, another bruise without a hand. Emily turned back toward the necklace still resting beneath its spotlight like a promise untouched. Her reflection in the glass looked smaller now, framed by laughter and contempt. But she remained still, spine straight, as if rooted to something stronger than pride. Outside, the sun lit the boutique's gold-lettered name on the door. Inside, no one saw the quiet war unfolding inside her, the kind fought without fists, without fire. Just presence. Just grace. By the time Emily turned toward the exit, her face was already online. The video, a shaky clip of her standing silently, security looming, had hit the boutique's private group chat. Captioned, "Thrift Store." Queen tries luxury. Within minutes it leaked. On Instagram, it gained traction under the cruel tag #MaisonMoocher. Commenters chimed in like a mob behind screens. Get her out, stealing elegance one tote at a time. The cruelest words weren't shouted, they were typed. And they came fast. A woman near the entrance held up her phone as Emily passed, filming with a faux pout. "Aw, look at her. Maybe she thought the necklace was on clearance." Her friend snorted. "She probably thinks Lumiere is a perfume brand." Emily didn't pause, didn't flinch. She simply walked her fingers, brushing the side of her tote like a compass, steadying her path. But the laughter behind her kept rising, following her like smoke. The diamond stayed behind untouched. But the story was already spiraling, one they thought they owned. One she hadn't told yet. Just steps from the exit. Emily paused, drawn for a moment by a side display of vintage brooches. Something about them reminded her of her grandmother's jewelry box, the way each piece had a memory tucked inside. She leaned in, eyes softening. And that was all the excuse they needed. Victor reappeared, boots loud on marble radio crackling. "Ma'am," he said, his voice intentionally raised, "I need to ask you to keep your bag where I can see it at all times." The words were sharp, rehearsed. He wasn't speaking to her, he was performing for the room. Emily turned slow and measured. Her eyes met his. Calm, unwavering. "Of course," she said again. She adjusted the strap across her shoulder, her movements deliberate. From behind, Vanessa leaned toward a colleague, voice dripping with disdain. "Classic distraction tactic," she muttered. "Touch the old stuff while your hands are in the real case." A few customers nodded, whispering in agreement. Phones hovered, recording. Emily stood there, framed by velvet and cruelty, her grace now a target. And still, she didn't raise her voice. Victor didn't move away. He hovered like a shadow meant to follow shame. Emily's steps became slower, not from hesitation, but from the weight of knowing she was no longer viewed as a guest, but as a suspect. Her sandals made no sound, but his boots echoed behind her with authority. The boutique was no longer a space of luxury, it was a stage for silent condemnation. A teenage girl whispered to her mother, "Is she stealing?" The mother hushed her, but not before the words landed. Vanessa exchanged a smirk with Ethan, the male associate, polishing rings nearby. "Keep an eye on her," she said deliberately loud. "She's got that look." Ethan nodded, his voice casual and cruel. "You mean the look of, 'Can I help you while I help myself?'" Laughter rippled. Emily heard it all. Every insinuation, every label. Her fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her tote, not to defend it, but to remind herself that inside it was something real. Memories, love, purpose. Things they couldn't see. Things they couldn't steal. The tension clung to the boutique like static. Emily moved with quiet intention toward the exit, her shoulders held high even as whispers swirled like smoke around her. A cluster of customers near the champagne station watched her go. Their eyes narrowed, their phones discreetly recording. One of them murmured, "Told you she'd try something." Another replied, "Let's see if she makes it past the door without a siren." And then Chelsea's voice rang out loud and venom-laced. "Still here, sweetheart? The pawn shop's down the block." Laughter erupted. Someone clapped mockingly. Emily didn't stop. But her hand tightened briefly on her tote, a silent wince beneath her calm. Just as she reached the final stretch, a crumpled tissue arced through the air and landed at her feet. "For your tears," Chelsea sneered. Phones caught the moment from every angle. The chant started softly. "No diamonds. No diamonds." It grew. A cruel chorus echoing off marble. Emily inhaled deeply, quietly, and kept walking, each step slow, each breath steady. Not because she wasn't breaking, but because she refused to let them see it. The doors loomed ahead, just a few quiet steps away. Emily didn't look back. Her stride remained calm, her chin level, even as behind her the taunts rose like bitter perfume. A teenage boy, filming, whispered, "She's gonna cry once she's outside." His friend laughed. Or, "Call her sugar daddy for bail." Emily's sandals brushed the marble, barely a sound, while the chant behind her faded into something darker, a hunger to shame. On Instagram, the tissue toss was already posted. Captioned, "Maison's reject gets what she deserves." Views climbed. Comments flooded in. She thought confidence was a credit card. Where's mall security when you need them? But Emily's eyes never wavered. Not from dignity, from discipline. At the threshold, she paused just for a second, as if to memorize the feeling, the weight of judgment, the sting of assumption, the silence of complicity. She reached into her tote and pressed her fingers to the photo tucked inside. Her wedding day. A reminder of who she was and who she wasn't. And with that, she stepped into the sunlight whole, though cracked. Quiet, but unbroken. Outside, the California sun wrapped around her like a soft veil, warm golden, indifferent to cruelty. Emily stood still for a breath, letting the light settle on her skin, on her linen dress, on the bruises no one could see. Her phone vibrated. A message from Ryan. "I'm 10 minutes away. Just stay where you are." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she glanced back at the boutique's glossy facade. Through the glass, she saw Vanessa laughing with Ethan. Victor, arms crossed, was still watching her like a threat that hadn't passed. No one inside looked remorseful. They looked entertained. The hurt wasn't sharp anymore. It was deep and dull, the kind that lingers not because it surprises, but because it confirms something she had hoped had changed. She walked a few steps to the side away from the entrance and found a quiet bench beneath a flowering jacaranda tree. Sitting, she opened her tote and pulled out the photo. The edges curled. The laughter frozen. Her fingers traced Ryan's smile, and though her lips didn't move, her eyes said it all. "I'm still me." And that is enough. Across the street, two young women sat at an outdoor cafe scrolling through their phones. One gasped, tilting her screen. "It's her," she whispered. "The woman from the video." They looked up, eyes wide, curious, a little smug. Emily felt their glances, the way they nudged each other, the way their camera lenses hovered just long enough to steal something sacred. But she didn't flinch. She folded the photo and slipped it gently back into her tote as if placing something precious back where it belonged. Her coffee arrived, ordered in silence moments before, and she wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the warmth anchor her. The online storm grew louder. Hatch Maison Moocher was trending. Edits of her tissue moment looped with pop music mocking captions' snide overlays. Her silence had been interpreted as shame, her calm mistaken for weakness. But Emily knew better. Strength wasn't loud. It didn't clap back. It simply endured. Across the table, her phone buzzed again. This time, Ryan's voice followed low, steady, fierce. "I saw the video," he said. "I'm on my way." Back inside Maison Lumière, everything resumed as if nothing had happened. The chandeliers still sparkled. Champagne still flowed. Laughter still fluttered among velvet and glass. Vanessa straightened a display of diamond earrings, her expression smug, satisfied. "Can you believe her nerve?" she said to Ethan, who chuckled while polishing a tray of rings. She really thought she could bluff her way into touching a $12 million piece. "She's probably crying into that ragged tote by now," he replied, grinning. Across the boutique, Chelsea posted a selfie with a new bracelet captioned, "Vibes Only." Real money, real welcome. Comments flooded in, cheering her mockery. No one questioned their behavior. No one felt shame. In their world, cruelty cloaked as class was acceptable, expected. They had no idea the story wasn't over. Outside, the sun brightened against the boutique's gold-lettered doors. But inside, the atmosphere soured quietly, unknowingly. Because in less than 10 minutes, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom would arrive. And everything they believed about power, presence, and worth would come undone. The Rolls-Royce Phantom eased down Rodeo Drive like silk over marble, silent, commanding. It didn't need to announce itself. People noticed. The valet nearly dropped a key fob when it pulled up. Its doors opened with a hushed elegance, and out stepped Ryan Sanders. No one recognized him immediately. He was the kind of powerful who didn't need to be seen. But once the boutique staff caught sight of him crossing the sidewalk, everything shifted. Black tailored suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, just presence. His steps were purposeful, unhurried, but the weight of him seemed to move the very air. Ryan wasn't a celebrity. He was the man celebrities feared losing funding from. CEO of a tech empire, whispered about in Forbes, invisible in public, unavoidable in business. He said nothing as he opened the passenger door. Emily stepped out behind him, same linen dress, same quiet strength. She didn't straighten her posture. She didn't need to. She simply met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. It was time, and as they walked toward the boutique together, silence fell inside like glass cracking under pressure. Inside, Vanessa looked up from behind the counter just as the boutique's glass doors swung open. The shift in atmosphere was instant, like the drop before a storm. Her smile faltered. Ethan froze mid-polish. Even Chelsea, mid-laugh, lowered her phone. Ryan Sanders stepped in first, every line of his frame cut with precision, his gaze cold, unreadable. Emily followed unhurried, her linen dress catching the light like silk spun from quiet resilience. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then trays clinked. A champagne flute tipped. The room exhaled, startled and stunned. Vanessa blinked hard, recognition dawning like a slow horror. Ethan's cloth slipped from his hand. Is that Chelsea?" whispered, eyes wide. "That's Ryan Sanders." Mr. Giovanni Drake, the boutique owner, rushed in from the stairwell vest, askew face pale. "Mr. Sanders," he stammered, bowing slightly. "This is a misunderstanding." Ryan's voice cut through the air. Low, calm, lethal. "You let your staff accuse my wife of stealing," he said. "You humiliated her, publicly." And in that moment, no diamond in the room could match the sharpness of his tone. The words hung in the air like a blade gleaming, suspended, inescapable. No one dared breathe. Vanessa's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Ryan's eyes didn't move from Mr. Drake. "You allowed it," he continued, voice even but ice cold. "You watched it happen. Or worse, built a culture where this is normal." Mr. Drake stuttered, hands slightly raised. I wasn't aware." "You are now," Ryan interrupted. Behind him, Emily stepped forward, not with defiance but quiet dignity. Her voice was soft but carried. "I didn't need anyone to know who I was," she said. "I just wanted to be treated with respect, like any other customer." Her words, simple and calm, cracked louder than anger. Around the boutique the energy shifted. Staff avoided her eyes. Guests shrank into silence. Chelsea backed up a step, her phone lowering. Ethan swallowed hard. Vanessa looked down, her authority disintegrating under the weight of recognition. Emily wasn't just a woman in a linen dress. She was the mirror they all hoped would never reflect them. Ryan turned, slightly extending a hand toward his assistant Lana Brooks, who had entered quietly behind them. Dressed in a navy blazer, tablet in hand, she stepped forward with practiced precision. The necklace, Ryan said, his tone final. No questions, no hesitation. Lana's fingers moved swiftly across the screen, initiating a wire transfer. The boutique's automated system pinged a confirmation $12 million cleared in seconds. Mr. Drake's breath caught in his throat as he turned, fumbling with the display case. His hands trembled as he unlocked it, gently lifting the pink diamond necklace from its velvet pedestal. No one spoke. Not a whisper, not even a click of a phone camera. Ryan took the necklace with quiet care and stepped behind Emily. Slowly, he placed it around her neck, his fingers moving with reverence, not to impress, but to honor. The diamonds caught the chandelier light, casting prisms across her collarbone. Then Ryan looked up. His voice was low, but each word struck like a gavel. "Now," he said, "she doesn't have to ask anyone for permission." And in that moment, every silence in the room became deafening. The room stood frozen, time suspended beneath crystal chandeliers and polished marble. Emily didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply lifted her chin, the pink diamond resting against her collarbone like a quiet exhale. Around her, the boutique seemed to shrink. Vanessa stood rigid, her arms stiff at her sides, lips parted in disbelief. Ethan took a step back, his hands trembling slightly. Even Chelsea, so loud minutes before now, stared at the floor, her phone forgotten in her hand. The balance of power had shifted not with fury, but with stillness. Ryan turned to Mr. Drake, whose voice barely found breath. "I assure you, Mr. Sanders, this isn't how we operate." But Ryan's gaze sliced through the excuse. "It's exactly how you operate. That's the problem." Then he looked at Vanessa. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You're fired." 3 words. No drama, no echo, just truth. Mr. Drake opened his mouth, but Ryan didn't look at him again. The verdict had been delivered, and the boutique was already unraveling. Vanessa's face crumpled, her poise collapsing under the weight of consequence. "Wait, please," she stammered, voice cracking. "I didn't know who she was." Her plea rang hollow brittle, lost in the silence that followed. Ryan didn't flinch. His eyes were already elsewhere on Emily, who stood quietly beneath the necklace's soft glow, her expression unreadable. Mr. Drake turned to Vanessa, jaw tight. "Pack your things," he said, barely above a whisper. "Now." No one moved to help her. Ethan stepped back suddenly, studying the floor. Chelsea pulled her fur coat tighter, shrinking behind a pillar of shame. Even the guard, Victor a looming presence minutes ago, quietly unhooked his earpiece and stepped aside as if trying to disappear. Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was the loudest voice in the room. Lana handed Ryan the signed confirmation from the transaction. "It's done," she said. Ryan nodded once, then turned to Emily. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. She gave a small smile, peaceful, centered. "Yes," she said. "Let's go," and together they walked out, not as a spectacle, but as a statement. The boutique's doors closed behind them with a soft whisper, but inside the silence roared. Mr. Drake stood motionless, his face pale beneath the showroom lights. No one returned to shopping. No one dared speak. The illusion of elegance had cracked, and everyone inside could feel it. Vanessa, eyes glassy with disbelief, turned in slow circles, realizing there was nowhere left to stand. Her heels suddenly felt too tall, her dress too tight. The boutique that once made her feel powerful now swallowed her whole. Ethan busied himself with a tray of rings, but his hands shook. The shine he'd once mocked on Emily's tote now haunted him. Nearby, Chelsea deleted her last post, thumbs trembling, but the internet had already taken hold. Screens lit up with news alerts. Ryan Sanders defends wife after boutique discrimination. The footage was spreading. The judgment they cast now came back tenfold, likes replaced with outrage, laughter drowned in backlash. Above them, the chandelier still sparkled, but everything beneath it had dimmed, and outside, beneath the sun, Emily and Ryan walked hand in hand, no anger, no show, just dignity, and the kind of silence that changes everything. Within the hour, the footage from Maison Lumiere's security system leaked anonymous, grainy, and damning. It began with Emily standing alone by the necklace, surrounded by suspicion. Then came Vanessa's smirk, Ethan's whispered jokes, Chelsea's tissue toss. Each frame a nail in the boutique's pristine facade. The video spread like fire across social media, stitched into TikToks, dissected on Twitter, reposted by influencers with captions like "Justice wears linen," the hashtag #SheDidn't. Ask trended globally within hours. Comment sections lit up with fury. This is why kindness matters. She stood there and took it all with grace. Vanessa should never work in retail again. Viewers paused not at the moment of the insult, but at the quiet strength of Emily's silence, the way she stood beneath the chandelier, as if it didn't shine for anyone else's approval. Major news outlets picked up the story. Headlines read, "Billionaire's wife humiliated at luxury boutique responds with Grace leaves with diamond." The world wasn't just watching now. It was listening. Not to scandal, but to a woman who had said almost nothing and somehow said everything. By evening, Emily's name was no longer unknown. Articles described her not as the billionaire's wife, but as Emily Sanders, advocate, former nonprofit leader, and quiet symbol of dignity. News anchors replayed the footage on loop, the tissue falling, the security check, her stillness. Ryan placing the necklace on her shoulders like a crown never begged for. Fashion bloggers, once obsessed with labels, now shared screenshots of her linen dress, calling it the new power uniform. A slow-motion clip of her walking out of Maison Lumiere, tote in hand, played over soft piano music on a viral reel captioned, "Elegance is refusal." Inside, the boutique fallout came fast. Clients began canceling appointments. Public figures denounced the store. Maison Lumiere's Instagram lost over 100,000 followers overnight. Vanessa's name trended for the wrong reasons. Her LinkedIn flooded with angry comments. Brands she once modeled for cut ties. Her online persona built on exclusivity dissolved in the face of real accountability. But Emily didn't speak. Not yet. She remained in the quiet. And sometimes silence is louder than justice. The next morning, Emily sat on her back porch, wrapped in a light cardigan, bare feet tucked beneath her. A cup of tea steamed gently in her hands. The sun filtered through garden leaves, casting soft gold across the worn wood. She wasn't scrolling. She wasn't reading headlines. She was still. On the table beside her sat the same leather-bound notebook, the one from her tote, and an envelope. Inside it, a handwritten letter from a former shelter resident she once helped. You were the first person who ever looked at me without judgment. I never forgot that. Emily read it slowly, her fingers brushing the edge, eyes misting but steady. She smiled, not from pride, but from something quieter recognition. Not of who the world now said she was, but of who she'd always been. She closed the notebook and looked toward the garden where a single flower had opened overnight. No one saw it bloom. No camera captured the moment. But she did, and that was enough. Across the city, Maison Lumière was unraveling. News vans parked outside. Protesters held signs not angry, but poignant. Respect has no dress code. Dignity doesn't need diamonds. Inside, Mr. Drake faced a boardroom of investors demanding explanations while his assistant whispered updates about boycotts, mass appointment cancellations, and a lawsuit rumor swirling in legal circles. But Emily wasn't watching. She stood in a quiet conference room at a small women's advocacy nonprofit, one she'd quietly supported for years. She didn't come with cameras. She came with purpose. On the table lay a proposal, a fund dedicated to women who had been discriminated against in elite spaces, whether because of how they dressed, where they came from, or what they couldn't afford to prove. Her pen hovered over the document. $12 million, the full value of the necklace. She signed her name, not as a headline, not as a billionaire's wife, as Emily Sanders. And just like that, the pink diamond changed hands not as a symbol of wealth, but as a spark for change. Word spread quickly. The Lumière Fund, named not after the boutique but after the light that Emily chose to carry, was launched with a mission that pierced deeper than scandal, to restore dignity where it had been denied. The announcement wasn't made through a press conference or viral video. It was a quiet statement on the fund's new website, paired with a single sentence for every woman who's ever been made to feel small in a room she had every right to enter. Within hours, stories poured in. Emails, letters, anonymous messages, women from luxury offices, university halls, fashion internships, all recounting moments when they were judged for their shoes, their skin, their silence. And still, Emily said little. Instead, she worked reviewing grant proposals, meeting with community leaders, writing personal notes to the first 20 recipients. Meanwhile, the necklace was sealed inside a climate-controlled case, its new home, the National Museum of Social Change. Its placard read, "Once used to deny a woman's worth, now used to defend it," and beneath that, "Donated by Emily Sanders." Back at Maison Lumière, the velvet displays sat untouched. The boutique's once proud aura had curdled into discomfort. Staff whispered behind counters. Foot traffic slowed to a trickle. Social media comments piled up like dust, elitist relic. Still waiting for accountability. Where's the apology? Mr. Drake tried damage control, apologetic statements, PR interviews, promises of inclusive retraining. But it was too late. Public sentiment had already shifted. The boutique, once a symbol of untouchable luxury, was now a case study in failure. Vanessa's name had become synonymous with cruelty. Her modeling contracts disappeared overnight. One brand's campaign pulled her face from digital billboards mid-rollout. Her last Instagram post, once filled with curated elegance, was now a war zone of backlash. Say her name, Emily Sanders. You mocked the wrong woman. Ethan quietly resigned, but screenshots of his smirks and quotes continued to circulate. His job offers vanished before they arrived. Even Chelsea found her influencer deals suspended, brands citing values misalignment. And through it all, Emily remained silent, not to avoid the noise, but because she had better things to listen to. The fallout deepened. Investors began pulling out of Maison Lumiere's parent company. Share prices slipped. Luxury forums buzzed with calls to boycott. Yelp flooded with one-star reviews titled, "They judged her tote, not her truth, and elegance is empathy." Within 2 weeks, over 200 high-profile clients signed an open letter published in Vogue, "We stand with Emily Sanders. We condemn the culture of silent exclusion masquerading as luxury." The letter wasn't just a PR blow, it was a cultural reckoning. It forced brands to re-examine their definition of exclusivity. At the Lumiere Fund office, Emily sat in a circle with 5 young women. They shared coffee stories, laughter, and pain. One, a law student, had been told she didn't look like a leader. Another, a black fashion intern, recalled being mistaken for staff at every event. Emily listened deeply. Notebook in hand, eyes kind and steady. She didn't interrupt. When one of them asked, "How did you stay quiet that whole time?" Emily smiled gently. "Because I wasn't there to win a fight," she said. "I was there to remember who I was." The legal avalanche came next. A class-action lawsuit backed by the Lumiere Fund's legal team was filed against Maison Lumiere and its parent company. Former employees stepped forward with testimonies of systemic bias hiring practices based on appearance internal chats mocking customers and VIP policies designed to subtly exclude. Vanessa was named directly in multiple claims. Ethan, too. Even Mr. Drake couldn't shield himself. Court documents leaked. Screenshots from the boutique's internal Slack channels exposed how jokes about Emily's appearance had spread among staff within minutes of her visit. Phrases like "linen looter" and "bargain bin queen" became evidence not just of cruelty, but of culture. Media outlets covered the story not as a scandal but a social shift. Talk shows ran segments on invisible wealth and visible judgment. Think pieces unpacked how luxury spaces had become gatekeepers of perceived worth. Meanwhile, Emily declined interviews. She simply issued one statement posted in elegant serif font on the Lumiere Fund's website: "You can't silence what was never shouting. You can only choose to finally listen." And people did. The court eventually reached a settlement, one that spoke louder than any verdict. Maison Lumiere agreed to pay millions in damages fund anti-discrimination programs and publicly apologize. But the true victory wasn't in the money. It was in the mandate 1,000 luxury retail employees would undergo training designed by the Lumiere Fund, centered not on sales, but on humanity. Emily reviewed the curriculum herself. Modules titled "The Weight of a Gaze," "When Dignity Walks in Wearing Sandals," "Empathy Behind the Counter." She sat at every planning meeting sipping tea, taking notes, listening to voices younger than hers but carrying pain just as deep. The training would launch first in Los Angeles, then expand to New York, London, Milan. And always at the core was the question she never had to say aloud: what if we valued people the way we value diamonds? Meanwhile, the necklace, no longer a trophy of power, rested behind museum glass. Children walked past it on school tours reading about the woman who turned humiliation into hope. Some left notes on the exhibit wall. One read, "Thank you for standing still when the world wanted you to shrink." And in a quiet moment between meetings, Emily flipped through her notebook and found a photo she had tucked away, her late mother sitting in their small backyard garden, hands dirt-covered, smiling toward a sky of orange and gold. Emily touched the photo's edge with a tenderness that spoke of roots, of loss, of gratitude. Months passed and the Lumiere Fund bloomed quietly like the women it served. In a modest brick office lined with second-hand bookshelves and soft lamps, change was no longer an idea. It was happening. Over 500 women had already received leadership training mentorships or legal aid. One opened a cafe after being denied a loan because of how she dressed. Another returned to school after being told she wasn't polished enough for law. Each name recorded, each story preserved not as proof but as purpose. Emily made time to meet them. No entourage, no cameras, just her notebook, and her listening. She taught one young woman how to structure her first board pitch, helped another choose a thrifted interview blazer that fit like armor. When asked if she ever regretted what happened, she smiled gently. "No," she said, "because they didn't break me. They reminded me who I want to build." Across the city, boutiques tried rebranding. But for thousands, the true luxury now had a new address where respect was offered first, no matter the dress code. And among the early beneficiaries of the fund was a familiar face, Marisol, once a teenage girl who'd watched Emily hand out blankets in the winter shelter line years ago. Now she was a staffer, and on hard days, she would quietly refill Emily's teacup and whisper, "You helped me before you even knew who I was." The world didn't just watch Emily Sanders, they followed her. Universities invited her to speak, not about the scandal, but about resilience. Women's organizations printed her quotes on banners, "Dignity doesn't ask permission." Museums requested interviews. Fashion houses sent letters, some apologizing, others asking to collaborate. She declined most. She wasn't building a brand. She was building a legacy. At a Lumiere Fund luncheon, she stood before a room of 300 women executives, mothers, students, survivors. She wore the same navy dress she'd worn when the fund was announced. No jewelry, just a linen notebook in her hands. "My story isn't unique," she said. "It just happened in a place where people were watching." The crowd grew still. Some nodded, some wiped tears. "The world tried to define me by a moment," she continued, "but I chose to define the moment instead." Outside, the museum still displayed the necklace. Children pressed their faces to the glass. Inside, a movement had outgrown the marble walls that once tried to contain it, and the woman in the linen dress. She was no longer just a symbol. She was a spark. Maison Lumiere never recovered. 6 months after the incident, its flagship boutique on Rodeo Drive quietly closed. The chandeliers were dimmed. Velvet cases stood empty, their contents sold off to cover legal costs. The gold-lettered signage was taken down in silence. No press, no farewell. Mr. Drake retired his name, fading from retail circles. Vanessa was last seen working a desk job under a new surname. Ethan's resume disappeared from LinkedIn, replaced by silence. Chelsea Voss attempted a rebrand, but the internet never forgot. Her fur coat was sold at auction, her influence gone with it. But none of this made headlines anymore. What did were the stories of women stepping forward. A teenager who'd been mocked at a college interview for wearing Payless heels now leading a mentorship circle. A single mother once escorted out of a designer store for not fitting the look. Now training luxury staff on empathy. Each ripple led back to that one moment in the boutique when a woman didn't fight back with rage or revenge. She just stood, and the world moved around her, and then because of her it changed. Emily stood once more beneath soft light, this time not in a boutique but on a small stage at a community center surrounded by women whose lives had quietly bloomed. She wore a simple navy blouse, her linen tote resting on a chair nearby. No diamonds, no spotlight. Just a microphone and a room full of listening hearts. She looked out across the faces, young, old, tired, radiant, and said calmly, "They thought the necklace was the story, but it wasn't." She paused. Let it land. The story was never about what I wore, it was about what I carried. The room held its breath. I carried silence, grace, pain, strength. And now I carry light not for me, but for all of us. Applause rose, not thunderous, but warm, steady, like gratitude wrapped in sound. That night, Emily walked home beneath a sky scattered with stars. The pink diamond now sat in a museum, but the real treasure, respect, courage, quiet power, had found its place elsewhere. In her, in them. And if her story moved, you don't forget to share it. Because sometimes the simplest woman carries the strongest light.